Well, good morning, good afternoon, good night, good evening, wherever, what time of day you're watching this. Sid Thompson back here. I've got an interesting guest, a guest that I think are going to have some good stories to talk a little hockey here. Um, this gentleman I actually played against as a youth, and not just hockey, baseball, and also football. Great guy, coached 19 years as a Pee Wee coach, 2 years in a Bantam coach. Also, mites, 8 years at the mite level, 3 years with the high school team there, and 7 years with the boys. He's from the down the road a little bit from my alumni, my hometown, Roseau, in the town of Warroad. I call it the evil neighbor. I jokingly say that, of course, because we're friends, all friends now after hockey. But back in the day, we wanted to take and practically murder each other. Back in the day when the rivalry was pretty intense. This gentleman, he's of the whiter background, but of the Ojibwe. I want to bring in Coach known as Darrel, son Shaugabay. It's a pleasure of mine to bring on son to talk a little hockey today. Son, can you hear me okay?
I can, Sid. Thanks for having me.
You bet, I appreciate it. So I'm so used to calling you son. I'm still calling you son. Is that, I got you there, son there. But most people don't know Darrel. They know son. So the way I start this, son, is I like to always go back and talk about being from where we're from, where it all started. And I got to throw up a couple pictures, and I want you to talk about, our youth, because we had some battles back in the day. And there's a picture or two I have of this place, which we all know, and I call it the Papa Palace. See if it pops up. There's one of them. You can kind of see that circa. That's probably our circa era with those cars
Yep.
up front. There's the old one, another one. The Memorial Arena, but better known as, to me, the Papa Palace. Had some great times, great memories there. Can you talk about your youth and how it all started playing in that building? Because that's where it all started for both of us back in the day,
Yeah.
playing each other.
Well, it did for me. How it really started for me was, in nowadays terms, I was a late starter. I didn't really start skating till I was 8 or 9 years old, and probably the reason I did that is because I only lived a block away, and just kind of migrated there. And so, with only being a block away, once I did start skating, it didn't take but a year, and I fell in love with it, and I spent a lot of time. In the winters there because it was so close, like say literally a block away. So that's how it started for me. But like say in terms of nowadays, starting at 8 or 9 years old, it was quite a shock to how early kids start now.
Yeah, you're actually late in the game there, but also when you say that, one thing I talk about is that kids that may start late, they may be late bloomers too. They just take a little longer. Some people give up on kids now because they start late. That should not the
Yeah.
case though, in some cases. So in the old barn is the old Papa Palace. This, here, this sign's gonna come up if it pops up on my screen. I remember that sign infamously playing in that end there above my head there. Hockey Town, USA. Let's talk a little bit about the growing up, playing each other back in the day, the rivalry, because we'll get into coaching and stuff in a little bit, but the rivalry back then and prior, you and I talked about prior to our days, it was a little more intense. But then when we played, you not only did one to beat the team on the ice, you wanted to beat them off the ice mainly too. It was about one of those deals where you wanted to beat the snot out of each other. It's kind of
Yeah.
tapered off now to where it's a little bit different, in modern day era, because these kids playing hockey with their friends and that. So can you talk about that, back when we were playing and prior to us, in the 60s, 70s and earlier than that? But what are your thoughts on the rivalry now? Because it is probably, in my opinion, the best rivalry in high school hockey.
That I
Still
agree
is.
with, and it still is the best rivalry. But I see the rivalry in my tenure being in hockey has been at three different levels. So the guys that I think became before us, the 70s and the 60s and 50s probably, I think, with the old backdoor way to get into the state tournament and all that kind of stuff, that was pretty intense, really intense. And only because I remember talking to people from that era, coaching with people from that era. And then in our era, it was still that's the game, right? You circle that baby on the calendar, whether it was in Pee Wees when you played maybe 4 times a year or in high school when you played. That was the one that you wanted. And it was always so fun to play. It was always the most people you played in front of, and boy, did you want to win. And so um, we came from an era where, when I was a sophomore and junior, Roseau had pretty good times against us. One time, Paul Broughton went off for about 9 points against us in a 10-2 win or something like that. But then when I was a senior, we were lucky enough to get you guys, so that made it feel pretty good. But again, you just wanted to beat them. It was just like more so than anything. And now, in the last 20 years or so, it's kind of changed where the rivalry is a respectful rivalry now, I think, meaning we always respect what Roseau does, and I'm sure it's the same there, on the teams that you produce and the players that you produce. But um, and for us, well, I won't speak for us. I'll speak for myself. Because we don't play in the playoffs anymore, the guys that we really circle on the calendar now is East Grand Forks. It's just changed a little bit, and that's the games you want. That's the games you absolutely want to get. And so and to me, in this modern era, I call our rivalry a respectful rivalry now, where you still want to win. You still want to win them because it's been so long, but it's just different, and mostly because, like you talked about, the kids nowadays, my kids included, you grow up and you end up playing spring hockey, summer hockey, fall hockey, and you're playing with a bunch of guys from Roseau and wherever, right? And so you end up really getting to know them, and they become good buddies, and so it's just a little bit got a different tinge to it now.
And let me spin off of that too, some because back when we played against each other, there wasn't as much hockey. I mean, summer hockey was like almost unheard of. You have camps, so we'd play each other in other sports. And now you have a lot
Yep.
more kids doing this specialized year-round hockey, which I get it, but I don't get it. I mean, I miss the days of kids playing multiple sports. Like when you played
Yeah.
three, or I played three, I played four sometimes with track, but you don't see that anymore.
No. Sometimes you get two sport athlete. It's rare to see a 3 sport athlete, and um, yeah, back in our era in the 70s and 80s, to me, you had to, like, in our smaller communities, if the athletes didn't play everything, it was hard to form teams and do good things. Like, there was one year in baseball, we had 11 players, and 9 of them were hockey players, right? So if the hockey players didn't play baseball, you weren't going to field baseball teams. So, and now that's
Yeah,
different. Of course,
absolutely.
our populations are up, so it's a little bit easier to field other teams. But in my recent experience with kids, especially the ones that are maybe a little advanced, if they're 2 sport athletes, you're lucky.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. The times have definitely changed. I remember actually, I'll go spin off of something else from this, but I remember listening. I think it was Glenn Healy talking on Hockey Night in Canada, he was talking about, and I think he was the tennis ball with his hockey stick. And he goes, "Hey, there's a sign of a kid who's played. Look at that hand-eye coordination. He's probably played golf or baseball or other sports." And I don't know if he did. I'm assuming he did, but that to me was something that kind of stuck in my head about multi-sport athletes because it rounds you and you're using different muscles and things as such. But
Yeah.
um, so from that, let's go into a couple different things about the youth. I want to bring up a couple people here because I'm sure that they really influenced you. And I know one gentleman in particular, I always used to be so kind to me. And every time I'd see him, he'd be sitting up in top. And I'm going to bring him up first. And let's talk about this gentleman right here, Cal, the Godfather.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did he affect your life there in Warroad and
Well,
playing hockey for the Warroad Warriors
well,
and in the youth system as well?
well. In the youth system, it was good because he helped a lot. He helped me a lot in just making sure to understand how you handle youth hockey in World, how many times you show up, when you show up, how much you practice, and then also letting me work in the rink a little bit when I was a teenager. So that meant a little extra, ice time here and there. But where he really had an influence on me personally was when I started coaching. So I'm a
Yeah.
19, 20-year-old kid coaching hockey, and he would always come to a game and he would always wait for you after. And he would always give you the good things and the bad things, but he always done it in a good way. Like never was it mean, or you should have did this better, or you should have did that better. Here's what I saw. Have you looked at this kid? How's your power play? Have you know what I mean? Just always positive, always would shake your hand and always say, thanks for coaching. So, and then just being around him as I grew into years 3, 4, 5, 8, it was just, he influenced me on how to handle teams and kids and players. And that's where he, to me, really influenced me. And then also getting me to understand when you're growing up in it, and I'm sure it's the same in Roseau, when you're young and you're growing up in it, you don't understand how it all works. How the people that have been before you and what they did to make sure it was that way. He taught me a lot of that to keep things going, you got to do it this way. And so that's where he had a lot of influence on me and then just probably because of it and how he handled it was just truly I loved coaching, like just teaching kids and watching them go from where they were in October or November to where they were in March, and just a great satisfaction of that. And that's what I learned a lot from him with
The development aspect. I love to
development
see too,
aspect.
not just on the ice sheet, but making helping them become good young men. After
Yep.
hockey, hockey's only a short window in high school and college. And we were talking about him, Cal, and I want to bring up another gentleman from my area because I think he had influence too. As you talked about being kind and that and everything, and the one guy I think of was Dick Johnson. Everybody thinks of him as just a tough-nosed, iron, spitting nails type of guy, but he also had influence in your coaching too. Can you shed some light on that? Maybe don't know
Yeah.
that because I know I did when you mentioned it. I bumped in last week against the NHL showcase.
Yeah, he did. And that's kind of when I started coaching. Like say I was a 19, 20-year-old kid, and I don't remember him when I was playing, but when I started coaching, you heard about Dick and how, like, say, iron-handed and iron-fisted and no nonsense and all that kind of stuff type of a coach. So, I started coaching Pee-wees, and that was his level for all those years. And so when I started coaching against him, somewhere 3, 4 years into it, he must have noticed something with me or something. But he asked me to be um, his assistant coach in an all-star game that him and Ron Novak started years ago, a Pee Wee all-star game. And the first time I got to spend time with him when this all-star game happened, it was, he taught me a couple things. And I don't know if you want me to share both of them, but it was
No,
just,
no, please tell both.
okay.
Yes,
There
please.
was two things that he taught me. The first time I met him, I sat down and he said, I want to teach you two things, young man. I was like, okay, what's that? And he goes, one is this. He goes, every parent has a necessary evil. And when you figure that out, it'll make your coaching career better. And two, he goes, there should never be a day that goes by that someone's not mad at you if you're a good coach. And to be honest with you, I was 22, 23 years old, and I didn't understand what he meant at first. I really didn't. But of course, as I got older, I completely understood what he meant. That and both of those two things, and I use part of that now whenever I start talking to young coaches about the parent leg of development. It's very important, even though sometimes you might view them as evil. That the unnecessary or the necessary evils of being a parent, you need them, but yet they're a big part of their development also. So how you handle them is really important. And then the other part was, and that one really took me probably even an extra year or two to understand with um, there shouldn't be a day that goes by that somebody shouldn't be mad at you if you're doing a really good job at coaching. And now I completely understand that. And so if anyone listening to this, if you're a coach, like if you understand that, great. If you don't, think about it a lot, because it will make your job easier and your life easier as a coach. And I don't just pick a sport, right? If and then I think you'll understand it. But it'll better you if you understand that advice. So that was always good, and I never forgot it. So appreciate it. And we ended up coaching
Well,
this all-star thing together for 3, 4 years, and always kept in contact with them over the years. And so yeah, he had an influence on me also.
Well, that's good. I mean, I think that both those pieces are very, very key element to coaching, and the latter one too. If everybody likes you, you're probably not doing the right thing. You're probably not doing a good job because then you're trying to be buddies with everybody, please everybody. That's
Yep.
not the way to go through life in general,
Yeah.
not just coaching. So, the unnecessary evils thing, I remember him talking about that on a broadcast between Rose and Warroad, and I think Wally Shaver was interviewing when Let's Play Hockey was there, and that's what Wally asked. He said, "Any advice, Dick, to any young coaches?" And that's what he said. So,
Yeah.
see, it stuck with you, and it stuck with me. So that's pretty cool that you did do that. So, um, now growing up in Warroad, I want to bring up. I'm going to put up a picture of another gentleman of Native American heritage, obviously that we all know, and he was always good to me as well. Always talked to me, and I want to know, Henry. There's NHL games, Olympian. He's a Hall of
Hmm.
Fame. What kind of an influence did he have on you, and just in general, the young Native American athletes in Warroad, being such the icon that he was.
Yeah. Well, the influence, it was not only him, but like if you look in the history of Warroad, there's always been natives that played since they started in the 40s, right?
Yeah.
It just, Warroad has a big native community and has for a long time. So there's always been natives there, and it's always been a really open arm welcome policy here. Which, when I talk around the state after all these years, that sometimes it's not always that way in some places. So that was one of it. But where Henry really influenced, I think, not only the native kids and families, but world as a whole. Recently, I told somebody that I think Henry's the guy that put Warroad on the map, per se. Um, Warroad was going along doing hockey, but when he showed up at the state tournament, then everybody kind of knew about Warroad more so than just the few Olympians that we had. As he made high school hockey cool in Warroad, and then that's when it really started to take off. And it was a lot of years between that era of when Henry was there to the next time we went, but um, he to me, like when I went to college and stuff, and I was too young to really watch him play. But
Yeah.
whenever I'd go somewhere, that if they saw I had a Warroad jacket on, they'd stop me and they'd say, "Do you know this guy? Did you watch him play?" And the stories I started hearing everywhere I went, I couldn't believe how good he was and what he meant. And so that's when I started thinking, yeah, he really helped put Warroad on the map, especially in high school hockey, with how good he was. And then on the native side, where I respected him even more so is when he was done with his playing days and stuff, and he came back to Warroad, and he really got the Indian education program going in our school, and was very involved with that just to keep all the other parts of the native community going. And it's still very prevalent in our school. And it was that I really appreciated Henry for, even more so than his hockey, to be honest with you.
Oh, and one thing I want to point out too, son, because I would listen to it. I think I mentioned to you in text. For those that you want to find out more about that, there was a very good interview a few years back. I forget the gentleman's name there, but you did that with the Youth Hockey Hub, about a half an hour, 45 minutes, talking about the heritage there in
Yeah.
Warwood, and I really
Yeah.
enjoyed that.
That
So,
was,
for those of you that are watching this, look up your son here and Youth Hockey Hub interview. Listen to that because there's really a lot of knowledge in there going back to the Oshie days, the early Oshie days, 40s, 50s,
yep.
about Henry and just how Warroad and the name and everything came. So it's very, very interesting. I'm glad I came across that. So, but I had to bring him up. I just wanted to bring up those two gentlemen and of course Dick because of the fact. And I didn't throw up this. I wanted to throw up this because we talked about it earlier already about the rugby. But I'm going to show you this stat. I don't know. This was a few years back. They did this for Hockey Day in Minnesota, the hockey thing. But this was a little poll, and look at the vote there. 82% chose Roseau and Warroad as the most the high school, intense rivalry. And maybe not be as intense now, but it's probably the most known. So that's pretty good out of 500 and some votes. 882%. Not bad. Not bad.
Yeah. Not even close.
So no, no, it's not. It's a blowout there. So let's move forward now. You hopping into, coaching the youth, coaching the Pee Wees, Bams, Mites, all that stuff. Your foray into high school hockey is with a teammate of yours, a guy I played against, and is Izzy Marvin, David Marvin. So I think this was, let's pull up the first picture here. What was it? One of the girls' pictures here. I want to find one of the teams I had a picture of. I think there was a 17. Did you start 16 or 17? I forget what it was,
Yeah. I think it was
but his
16.
team, yeah, and I think that's 17, 18 team. But on all those teams he played with, coached with, excuse me, the girls, um, 16, I think that was the first year you coached with Izzy. I think you were third place, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 17, you were in third place. And again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you moved up to runner up there in 18. I don't know if I think that's correct, but and the girls
Yeah.
not too bad with the girls coaching there and coaching alongside one of your teammates back in the day, David Marvin. So can you
Yeah.
talk about the foray into moving from youth into girls hockey, now you're into high school hockey? How was that different? What did you learn from coaching with the girls and David Marvin?
Well, it was very interesting, and I'll correct that a little bit because to me, it's a really good story. So I was doing this mite program and just kind of having fun with just finding young coaches and working with young kids. Doing that, I was like 7, 8 years into it, and Izzy or David came to me and he's like, I need an assistant coach next year. We're going to be a really young team." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, um, "Everyone tells me that you're a really good teacher." And he goes, "So would you come and help me?" He goes, "I got a 3-year plan on this." I said, "What's that?" He goes, "Well, I got a bunch of 8th, 9th, and 10th graders. We're not expected to win or anything, but there's some talent, but we got to get them ready." So I said, "You know what?" I said, "If that's the plan," I said, "I'll give you a 3-year commitment that I'll work with you until these girls get old enough, and we'll get them off to a state tournament, and then I can be done." Like, I seriously thought I was going to be done coaching because I was pretty much thinking really hard about quitting before he came to me. So that was the deal. I did have a really young team. Um, was still good enough to always play in the section final, but we couldn't get one in those first 2 years because we were just young. And that was back in the Thief River East Grand days when they were pretty good. Emily Berglund and some of those girls were really good. So we couldn't quite get them. But when we were in the third year, when most of these girls were seniors and juniors now, we got back to the state tournament and ended up finishing third or fourth that year. I can't even remember. And it was great. Like being on that side of it, at the X and all that excitement, all that was really fun. But then on the way home after the state tournament, matter of fact, we were heading to East Grand Forks for a boys semifinal game, and David's son was playing.
Okay.
So on the way home, he just asked me, he said, "Okay, you said 3-year commitment. Did you really mean that?" I said, "Yep, I'm putting in my resignation today." So, and he's like, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, if I do coach anymore, I might go back to Pee Wee's because my son was going to be in Pee Wee's then." And
Okay.
needless to say, that was the end of that part of it, which then just led when Coach Hardwick found out that I was not good doing girls anymore. He kind of heard the same story, so he came in and about a month later and said, "How about you join the boys team instead of the?" And I was like, "Okay." So but that was a good story. It was like a 3-year deal. Let's get these girls to the state tournament, and then I was going to be done, and I was. So I was with David for development stuff, and then I let it go after that and went over to the boys side.
Okay.
So
Well, that's interesting story and a fun story actually. We know how you resign on the bus going to the boys section
yeah,
final or section game. That's interesting telling
yeah.
that. Um, so let's jump over to the boys. But before we do, I want to take in that. I think it's important. You talked about a teacher and stuff and what you like. I'm doing some research there, son. I found out, and I want you to talk about this before we talk about the high school because I thought this very interesting in this article I found about you. And it says, "I have one major leadership model I follow. I call it the APE. This is based on what you control as an athlete or a person. A is attitude, P is preparedness, and E is for effort." Talk a little bit about that if you don't mind before we start talking about the high school boys teams you were coaching. Can you bring that up? And
Well,
where did that come
yeah.
from?
Especially now in high school, like when I was coaching youth, those young guys, those guys that were 13 or under, um, that was a lot of just teaching fundamentals, all that type of stuff. Especially when I was
Yeah.
with the mites, the young guys, just skating and
Oh, yeah.
passing and shooting and all that. But now being in high school, you know, some guys say you just control your controllables, which are how you play, how your attitude is, your effort, and then to me, preparing, especially now in this day and age, like everyone has access to video, and
Yes.
I just think, especially men, uh, they're such visual learners that I think you're doing an
Hmm.
injustice if you don't watch yourself on tape or your team on tape or your power play on tape or whatever. So I try to get all those kids to understand those are the three things that you can control. Absolutely. And if you do those three things, you will be a better person and a better player for sure. Again, in any sport, when you think about it, because those are the only things that you can control: your attitude, how you prepare, and then how hard you work or your effort. So that is a big thing for me. Try to tell kids that all the time as much as I can, and point out to them, there was a time there, like you missed that our set play because you didn't know exactly what we were doing, so you weren't prepared. So that's it's a big part of, especially at the high school level. So
I couldn't agree with you more. You talk about the video aspect now. It's amazing what, we have available to us now with all these different, you know, video analysis things and such. There's no reason why you shouldn't be watching it. And not only that, watch other games, watch pro, watch college,
yeah.
learn from your position. And that's great. And we didn't have much video back in our day. It's
No,
grainy.
not
And
much.
if I wish we did, because then you could, you talk about scoring on me a few times. You actually can verify that, because I know in my mind you never did score on me, but
Yeah, I teach you about the Pee Wee goal, but I remember when I was a senior, I had two goals in the Gardens against you when we won 5-2. So,
I had a
but
couple good games in that Popple Palace and the one in that. You remember those things. That's the thing about hockey in the day, playing in the rivalry. I remember those games. I remember those games where, we tied. I think there in the Garden was 4-4, and then we lost 2-1 one year when Shane McFarland took a puck in front of the slot, bam, blew it by me. Remember Steve Ross lost it off of his stick when I went a bump or something
yeah,
in front, didn't have a chance. I don't forget those games. It's kind of crazy though. Would have been nice to have video back then, because then I could actually say, "Hey, see, I was okay. I wasn't that bad of a goaltender, even no matter what
yeah.
Son says about me."
No, I never said that. I just said I got a
Like,
couple on you.
well, a lot of people got a few on me. A lot of people got a few on me, but no, I wanted to talk about that. You talked about that ape thing, because that's very important. The preparedness and this, coaching is such a psychological. I mean, you almost have to have a psychology degree. So anybody talks about psychology as a bunk degree, I disagree. If you've ever coached, you're working with young
Oh,
athletes and boys and girls, and you gotta, there's a lot in the mind. Of course, we can't do that stuff that the guys like the Dickie Johnsons of the world back in the
no,
day did. Tony Sarslands and tough nose guys, but you have to be a hybrid now and really
you do.
understand how to work with people. With people. So let's hop into the high school thing. I talked about, before I'm going to show this picture here, because you're able to coach your son. He's doing real well. When I saw he was with you there at the showcase, now drafted and such. It's not about him necessarily. This is about you. But going into the high school, the boys, there were some really good teams. I look at the brackets here. You had a couple teams. I'm going to pull up a bracket here in 2023 when you're coaching. People can look at this once it pops up here. Come on, now a little slow internet, but you look at this tough loss to Montemedi. But if you look at that overtime in the semis, overtime in the finals, that was by far one of the most exciting tournament game. Watching you guys in that tournament, I really thought that was your year. But boy, that was a good one. And then in 2024, I'm going to pull up that bracket too, because it's important to see. You had a tough one there against St. Cloud Cathedral, and Cathedral ended up winning it that year. But again, another exciting game. I remember watching this game there. These experiences you had coaching your son and coaching on these teams, talk about it. I mean, how you got in there, and just the experience of doing it, and being able to coach with not only your son, I mean, on ice, but also as an assistant coach, correct?
Correct.
So that's got to be quite, just the memories.
It is. It's thankfully, gratefully, whatever word you want to say, that all of my three sons, because I have a son that's in his early 30s, mid 30s right now, and his high school career, I wasn't coaching. I was coaching peewees and bantam and stuff at that time, and so we got to experience the state tournament. But I experienced that as a dad only. And then so when Jason was lucky enough to go, and he was a 14-year-old freshman, it was another, like say, even more so than the coaching aspect, just the father son aspect of that was another experience that is to me really special. Like, again, not even so much coaching, because my role on the team as an assistant is not so much one-on-one, and a little bit of teaching here and there on systems and all that kind of stuff. But it was the other stuff. It was the experience on the bus and the hotel and the games and the winning and the losing and all that at that point, the highest level of his career. And that was really fun and really special to be part of that. And he was lucky enough in 3 of the 4 years he was in high school to go, and especially in his last 2 years, make it to the championship game and just see him as my son, but also as a player, how he handled that stuff and how he played. And that was special. Yes, especially in 23, that was one that is a bugger. That was a really good, solid Warroad team. 22, 23, 24, those were all good teams, but the 23 one was something that we were really hoping for when Jason was a senior, and we couldn't get it. We just had some good defensive breakdowns, and then I'll give Matamidai and Jeff Peschel a good, that they did a really good job on Jason that day, and we just couldn't get it.
Yeah, sometimes it's not your day. I mean, that was just that was a wild and woolly game, but yeah, Pesh, you did have a good coaching. Had a good plan there. I think almost like Paul Maurice, like the strategy that they
Yeah,
just kind of. Um, when we talk about that, I want to bring up something again. You and I discussed, and I talk about double A for Roseau, single A for Warroad. You get to the tournament. Roseau's had a tough time. I don't know when we're gonna get back there, but Warroad's getting there. And I'm like, we talked about the runner-up or third place, whatever. You want to win it, but then I want you to talk about that because you made some good points. I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're right. You want to be there. You want to win it, but the exposure just down. I mean, can you bring up? You remember our conversation? We had a little bit about that at the lane that one day.
I
Talking about just
do.
being that, not just being there, being there, really helping the community
Yep.
and some of the
And
kids.
I've had this similar type conversation with other people. I don't want to maybe not say his name. Well, I'll say it. Derek Plant from Hermantown, right? When his boys are playing in Hermantown, I had this same discussion with him too. And basically what the discussion is this. Like, for me in Warroad, and I think for many people in Warroad, again, I won't speak for everybody, but it's so important to shoot for that state tournament every year, because it does so many things for your community, and of course for the players that are maybe on that team. The exposure, people talk about Warroad, like if you're not there but once every 10 years or 15 years or something, then your community doesn't get talked about as much. But if you're there, like, we've had a pretty good run here in the last 6-7 years of the amount of appearances we've had there. It's really good for the community, and it's really good for the players on that team, because there's just always a lot more eyes, it seems like, when you're at state tournament. And when I asked Derek Plant that in Hermantown, and it was a little bit different, but it still, to me, meant the same. So, like, I asked him one time, because I know Hermantown gets it a lot and Warroad gets it a lot, about, you guys should go to double A. You guys should go to double A. You're too good. And so I asked Derek why Hermantown stayed in single A. And his answer was, my dad has said this, his dad being Bruce Plant, who was a longtime coach there. Bruce said, it's this simple. If you go to the state tournament, now he didn't say if you win the state tournament, he said if you go to the state tournament, 50 kids sign up for hockey the next year when they're 5 years old. And I said, that I don't need to hear another thing. I completely understand that. Right. So Bruce's and Hermantown's philosophy, at least through Bruce, was if you go to the state tournament, you'll keep a good interest with the young guys to keep coming in and feeding your program. And it's kind of the same for me. Like, every time we go to the state tournament, there's an excitement in our town and our community. And now maybe we can get some kids to say, I want to play that sport, dad or mom. That I like that hockey thing because we see him on TV. That's basically what it gets down to.
No, that's some very good points made by Bruce Plant, another guy who kind of maybe looked like a Dickie Johnson coach out there. He's always stern, but he always treated me well when I broadcast. Great guy. I like the guy. I loved talking
Yeah.
to him. But he was kind of Paul Maurice too, very pointing to the point, made a point.
Oh yeah.
No gray area there. You knew where he stood on things. That's what I liked about him. So, but I think that that's a good point. You see it now in my hometown, struggling with numbers a little bit. Roseau and Warroad drove all the way down to Marshall to play in the Bantam Class A tournament. Believe it or not, they should have played. Said,
Yep.
I went home. Let's just go home and play in like Warren on the way home or play Deep River. But anyway, numbers and winning breeds winning. Winning breeds interest. That's definitely a very good point that you bring up. there. And I know the rivalry thing. I think it would be a lot different. Morehead's a wagon. Let's put it that way. For both Rosa and Warroad to try and get through. They're a wagon now. I mean, I have
Yep.
to jokingly say I think I started that back in the day when I got beat by them in the semifinals because we were expecting to play you guys who were upset by them, I think.
Yep.
And they ended up, maybe did make it to the tournament, but I think that from there on out, they just continuously grown and grown and grown and grown. And it's difficult. It's tough. The
And
numbers,
growing.
numbers make a difference. Numbers make a
Big
difference.
difference.
Numbers
Yep.
aren't there. It's very tough to play. And so let's joke about, I'm going to bring this up. This is just totally jokingly. I mean, because I know it would never happen, but could you imagine the co-op in Roseau County? If there was, we talked about it. Jokey said, if there was a nice rink in Salo,
Yeah. Yeah.
we've combined both schools. What do you think, huh? Who'd you say brought that up jokingly? I think he's passed away, so we can talk about it. Didn't someone
Yeah.
bring that up, some years ago?
Yeah. To me, the funny thing about it all was he wasn't a hockey guy. He was just a really kind of a
Okay.
sports guy and all this kind of stuff.
Yep.
But a couple years ago, before he passed, the same thing. We were just sitting at a football game, and he comes up to me and he goes, "Son, I still have this plan. I still have this great dream that, boy, we could be called the Roseau County North Stars, build arena in Salo." He goes, "Would anybody ever beat Warroad and Roseau if they combined?" I said, "Boy, that would be fun." Because I said, I agree with the number of players both towns produce. I said, "Boy, that would be kind of fun."
Absolutely.
But he goes, "I know it's never going to happen, but he goes, I just dreamed that I'd love to have a rink in Salo and call it the Roseau County North Stars and combine the two schools." And he goes, "I think we'd be like talk about a hockey wagon." There you go. So
Exactly. Well,
yeah,
and the thing is nowadays, the rivalry, I mean, the intensity, like where they're butting heads, like you said, cohesiveness is a little more buddy now. So I think that would, can probably ruffle the feathers of some people back home watching this,
I was
but
gonna
hey,
say, yeah, you run that up the flag in Roseau, I'll run it up the flag in Warroad, see how high it gets.
never happen. Never, never. They'll probably ban me now at the Roseau Hockey Alumni Association when I go up there this
Yeah,
summer for a hockey thing. I'm like, oh boy, what the heck were you thinking, Sid? But anyway, but yeah, we're kind of winding down here. I wanted to keep it to a minute because I know tonight's graduation. You got some probably, I think a few of those to attend tonight, and then this weekend it'll be a
yeah,
busy weekend there up in the Warroad and all the graduations. Hard to believe time flies. It's crazy. It's almost June, but hockey year round, as far as I'm concerned, because I'm selling sticks, by the way, and I want to bring that up too about you because you had some involvement with Christian Brothers. Didn't you there for a while before going on to Heat more? Can you
I
talk
sure
about?
did. I worked for Christian Brothers for 9 or 10 years, right when I got back from school, and just did that for a while. And so I got to live that hockey stick thing for 8, 9 years, which was again quite interesting. And as I was leaving, it was the evolution of when this new era that we live in now was starting to happen, and it was quite a thing, with Easton and these guys getting into the game. Um, yeah, it's just completely changed. But yeah, I worked for Christian Brothers Hockey for 9 years, I think it was.
Yeah, it's crazy. I took a little pen on the bottom, and I jokingly talk about because I mean I'm sponsoring this. I'm Sid Sticks. I just think it's gotten crazy. We all have to have a why, and my why I did that, son. My grandmother raised me, wasn't very influential, very, very influential for me. Worked at Polaris. It's tough to get by. Today, if I was raised, by her in the same day, working at the plant, I probably wouldn't be able to play hockey. It's got to be really expensive. It's crazy that what's
Oh,
come. But parents find a way
yep.
to do it because it's the greatest game on earth, in my opinion. And the people are great. We have memories that go a long ways that, you look back and I know I saw a post the other day about Big George Palau. I miss him immensely. George, I had a good relationship with George, and remember that's 40 plus years ago, going all the way up. The Roseau, Warroad rivalry, the Bemidji's, and East Grand. There's guys I talked to today that I played many, many years ago. That's the beauty of this sport that we call hockey. So, but
Yeah.
I want to kind of end it with this, and maybe we could talk. Is there anything else you want to bring up before you have to ask the last question here? Because I know I want to keep about 40, 45 minutes, but anything that comes to mind that you want to throw out there that, over the years of playing against each other and just coaching hockey or whatever it may be that you want to throw out there for people?
No, other than what I said it earlier, and what I'd like most hockey fans that, every year it seems like somebody's showing up in Warroad or Roseau, and it's a bucket list item to watch that rivalry.
Yeah.
people from New York State. The New York Times was here 10 years ago. I mean, just
Right.
people are always coming for that game. But I think what a lot of people maybe miss in because it's just a rivalry and is, but just what I think it is, and I think a lot of people do, both cities, both Rose and Warroad, is the respectful rivalry, right? It's um, when I coach a lot of the time, especially when I was coaching peewees and stuff, was to me, you could always just go 20 miles down the road and have a measuring stick if you ever thought you were a good player or a good team. Like we didn't have to go far. And if you wanted a measuring stick, it was just 20 miles away. And so to me, have always respected what Roseau does and how they produce the teams and the players. And it's just so interesting. And again, all of this in 20 miles away from each other in small communities. To me, it's amazing. And so I just think that overall, it's just such a respectful rivalry that we just always have something
No,
to
and
shoot for.
I can appreciate that. And the one thing you talk about, we're smaller communities, but Rose and Warroad, what's Rose now? 2,500? I don't know, 2,500. What's it, Warroad now? Probably 2,000, 2,500. I'd say they're
Yep,
both, let's say 5,000 combined. I don't know. Warroad has what, two rinks now, indoor rinks,
correct.
right?
Yep,
Roseau's got three. They got
yeah,
the old memorial, which heaven forbid, I hope that never gets taken down. I mean, I hated to see the Papa Palace go because a lot of history there. And they got the North Rink, and then the girls have their own. That's
yep,
more rinks, in our county, and some big communities have. I mean, I'm in Winona, we have one rink, and that's the college rink too, but it's not the best. I mean, it's really something to say about accessibility. Go to the rink. Um, I remember as a kid, we'd be dropped off or go to the rink. That's kind of that was the
yep,
free babysitter, but you didn't have to worry about a thing because
yep.
you take care of each other. The kids are there; they take care of them, and that's what I really like about the community too. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm going to leave it with this
Another
last
respectful.
question. We're, we're approaching that 45-minute mark we talked about. I want you to, maybe you've already talked about it because a couple of questions we talked about earlier, people we talked about. But if I was a young coach, parent, or a young player that came to you and said, Mr. Shaugabay, what advice can you give me as a young athlete? It could be hockey. Obviously, we're talking hockey, but just in general, what advice would you give me if I asked you something like that? What would you tell them?
Well, that's three levels there, Sid. And first, I'll start with the kids. I would say if it's a young athlete anywhere between the ages of 8 and 16, I would say, you know, have your sport, make it as fun as you can make it, because if you have fun in it, you will develop a passion. And if that passion comes, you'll have some success, whether it's individually or as a team. That will happen. In my years of coaching, that to me has proven out to be true. What I would tell a parent is that you are one of the four legs of your child's development. The other one is a coach and your teammates and your ice time or field time or court time, whatever. So those four legs. So you're one of the major uh, legs in that development program. But let the coaches coach. That would be a simple thing, and that's what I tell parents. And then lastly, what I would tell any young coach getting in, which I've tried to do quite a bit, um, is to same thing is prepare and if it becomes fun for you and if you can remember some of the little rules, you should do that. It'll make your job a little bit easier. But if you ever get into a position, I think that for a team to have success that has more than one coach, I think you got to have a teacher and you got to have a motivator at minimum, right? And because two motivators won't work and two teachers won't work as good as it can. So when I'm talking to a young guy that's thinking about coaching peewees or bantams or something, I said, "Are you the motivator or are you the teacher?" And they tell me what they think they're strong at, and I say, "Okay, well then go find the opposite to be one of your assistants." So if you're a really good teacher, if like me, I'm not that motivator, sis boom ba, that type of a guy. I'm more of a teacher. So I would always try to find that guy that is the rah rah, cheer you up, pat you on the butt, all that kind of stuff, because two guys like me just won't work as good, and just two guys that are motivators might not work as good. So I always tell coaches that think about your staff, think about what you're going to do, and at least have one of each on your staff.
Son, those are three very, very good points that I hope people take to heart because I can't say enough, but they all are very, very good points. And of course, what the great Cal Marvin and the great Dickie Johnson told us about coaching, we have necessary
Yep.
labels as substitute. So, but yeah, it's been an absolute slice. So we're right at the 45-minute mark. I really appreciate you doing this, knowing your schedule. And the internet, I was kind of worried about that, but thanks so much for doing this. I'll put this up on my Facebook. I got my YouTube and a link to my website too with my sidsticks.com site. So thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm really glad I bumped at the case. I forgot about Mooney. I mean, geez, what more Shaugabay playing hockey. So looking forward to seeing his career as he's getting a little older here. But it's a small world we live in when it comes to the hockey world, and we're all very closely knit. So once a hockey player, hockey coach, hockey parent, you're always going to be there for somebody else in this game. And I thank you for doing this, and I appreciate it. And you enjoy your weekend and have a safe Memorial Day weekend. And thanks again, son.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome, Sid. Good luck with your Sid Sticks. Hope it works out well for you.
Yeah, and the main thing, stay healthy, my friend. That's the main thing. Stay healthy.
Yep. Thanks, Sid.